When you remove the gate seal, it's important never to use a metal tool such as a screwdriver to remove the O-ring. You always want to use a plastic O-ring pick. The first step is to lubricate the O-ring, the old O-ring, with some DI. That will just help the O-ring come out smooth. The next step is to take your O-ring pick and go in from the outside in one of the vent holes. And then turn the O-ring pick around so that it grabs the O-ring and lift out slowly. If you're going to be saving this O-ring, you want to be sure not to puncture the O-ring. Once it's out, simply remove the D-seal O-ring, using the DI as a lubricant. After you've removed the O-ring, you want to clean the O-ring gland. You can simply take your clean room wipe and your O-ring pick and wipe around the inside, making sure that you've removed all of the residue from the old O-ring and any process or particles that have been generated because of it. Once you've cleaned the O-ring groove, you then want to install the new O-ring. You can simply lay the new O-ring out. This is the installation procedure for a D-seal or teardrop shape O-ring. You'll notice that this O-ring is not round. It has the cross section of a teardrop or a D. Your O-rings may vary in the field. This is the installation procedure solely for this O-ring. The first thing you'd like to do is fill up the O-ring groove with some DI water. That helps lubricate the O-ring. You can then add a little bit of DI right to the O-ring itself, just to help it go in. So first you want to find a vent hole on the O-ring gland. The D-seal O-ring has a point and a round side. The point wants to point in towards the center of the gate assembly. The rounded side goes towards the outside. In order to facilitate that, you must put the O-ring in and then turn it in to its correct position. You can easily do that by pressing down at the vent hole opening and making sure that the point is in. When you move around to the next section of O-ring, simply stretch the O-ring a little bit to reduce the cross section and roll it in. You can continue to do that all the way around the O-ring groove. The whole time you want to be pushing back on the O-ring so that you're not stretching out the O-ring on its cross section. When you get around to the beginning again, after you've been pushing back and doing your roll and twist motion to get the O-ring into the groove, you'll notice that you have a little bit of excess groove and not enough O-ring. That's a very good sign. You want to make sure that the O-ring is stretched across at the very end so that when you put the final piece in, it rolls in by itself. So what I'm going to do is push, stretch, roll, and as I'm doing this, the O-ring is getting tighter and tighter, and the very last piece will simply slip in. If you notice a twist on the end, the O-ring may twist. That's not good. In fact, the O-ring needs to be slightly loose in its gland when you're using a D-seal. When you've finished installing the O-ring, you want to blow out the vent holes with compressed air or nitrogen. That will remove all of the DI water from the O-ring gland. You want to make sure this is done before you put the gate assembly back into the valve.